Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Hayes. It's October 2nd, and the Ukrainians have taken Lyman. So, this short rant is about what Ukraine's next move is, or what is Putin's next disaster. Okay, so where are we? Just kind of an overview here. The Ukrainians just took Lyman, and hey, this is not a surprise. For over a week now, I've been talking either here in short rants or I do like daily TikToks. And I just been Lyman. And it took a while, but it finally got into the news, right? And so we've seen that success. So the question is, what else can we be looking for, right? So if we take just kind of an overview, what else is going on out there? First of all, there's Kupiansk, right? Kupiansk is a city on the Oskil River to the north. Oskil River is a major obstacle. The Ukrainians have taken that, and they are on the other side. And you can see that little bulge there, right? So they are building up forces on the western side of Kupiansk, and I think that bears watching. Also down in the south, there isn't often discernible movement, and in fact, the Ukrainians are kind of canny about what they're actually doing. Technical term is they're maintaining operational silence. But there's been a lot of reports about Davidov Brid, right? And so I'm kind of going, I keep hearing that name and stuff. What's going on there? So we may see some action on that southern offensive, which was what originally the Ukrainians were telegraphing, and they were using that to draw Russian attention and draw reinforcements to the south. And what's interesting is that appears to keep working, because reports are coming out from ISW that Putin is continuing to dictate the reinforcement of Kherson, right? The reinforcement of the south. Now, this might make sense, right? This might be more important to him, right? Keeping control of the south, they're taking stuff in the north that's less important than maintaining the land bridge to Crimea. So there could be some logic to this, but it appears that Putin is continuing to be focused on that Ukrainian southern operation. At the same time, Russian forces continue to beat on the front door of Sloviansk, which is the town of Bakhmut, and they keep trying to get the rest of Donetsk province, right? That appears to be part of their goal, and they just don't seem to have, really started. They're not putting red arrows up against those blue arrows very much, right? I'm sure they'll probably move some people in there, but this appears to be what's going on from the Russian side. Reinforce the south and keep banging on, trying to achieve your original objective of taking Donetsk province. Now, let's look at this southern operation in a little more detail. Okay, here we are in the south. And the key thing here is that the Ukrainians are doing operational interdiction, right? A little buzzword for you. Operational means, the level above tactical, but below strategic. And interdiction means attacking things in the back. You're not going and taking land, but you are attacking and destroying things, usually with indirect fire, artillery, air, whatever. And so operational interdiction means you're plinking targets in the enemy's rear. You're taking out logistics, command and control, their ground lines of communications, and you're hollowing out the force. But they're also, you see there's always 5 circles, right? It's kind of like almost an Olympic symbol every day when the ISW, who, by the way, did these maps as indicated on the graphics there, ISW always has, the circles represent fighting, kinetic activity, where they have reports of activity, and every day there's fight, right? So they're keeping the pressure up on the front lines while attacking and hollowing out the rear areas. And in general, ISW always says the Ukrainians are maintaining operational silence, meaning they're not kind of telling what they're doing, right? They're not commenting a lot on what's going on. But there have been I increasingly see the name Davidov Brid and another name, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, and I keep seeing it in reports, and you do see there is a bulge in there, right? We're seeing it. And so I have a question mark there, because it's not clear that this is any kind of, when they were moving on Lyman, it became pretty clear they were frickin' moving on Lyman. But now it's like, I don't know. The thing is, though, if they kept going, right? If they could get, extend that bulge, get down to the Dnieper River there, right? The Dnieper River, it's like 10 miles wide in places. It's often more like an inland sea. But if they could get down there, they could cut off the Russians that are in the northern part, right? Those top two circles. I call that the clothesline because those troops have been hung out to dry. I've been watching this, and every time I look at this map and I see those rings up there, I'm like, why the hell are there still troops up there? Right? Those guys should have been called in a long time ago because they're just hanging out there doing not much good, right? And so the thing is, though, the Ukrainians, if they continued along that axis, they could cut basically the Russian area in half and shrink the perimeter down and maybe cut off troops. Or if they threaten to do it, they might get those troops to withdraw on their own, or someone finally might wise up and pull those guys in. So that's what I see happening here. Now, there's a larger thing going on here. William Spaniel has suggested that the military, that there's a rift between Putin and his generals in the Ministry of Defense, that the military wishes they weren't on the western side of the Dnieper River. And that red line there is where the river cuts through, and there's only a few bridges across it, and the Ukrainians have been degrading them. So now it would be very difficult to move large numbers of troops across. And the military rightly worried about getting trapped on the other side of the river. And the river is a great natural obstacle, right? Why wouldn't you use that as your defensive line? And so it made sense to be in Kherson, right? It made sense to be on the other side of the river. In fact, it's a major gain. I was very disappointed early in the war, taking the Ukrainian side, of course, that the Russians were able to get across the river, because I thought that was Ukraine's greatest natural defense, an obstacle, right? But that was valuable only if you were going to continue on to the west, pass through Mykolaiv, across that other river there, and then get to Odessa, right? Because taking Odessa would be, would cover, right? Would cut Ukraine off from the south. Well, that's not happening. So really, there's really no reason to be on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. So maybe you should be at the military's preferred positions. And if this all goes to hell, right? And if, lots of ifs, there really was a rift between Putin and his generals, then failure here would not only be ugly, right? Failure here can get very ugly because troops will not be able to get across the bridges. There's reports that they've been stealing motorcycles and mopeds, and so a lot of folks are getting ready to run, but it's going to get ugly here. And if it's ugly in a military "we told you so" situation, it could stoke internal dissension. So this is something we want to watch. It might not move, right? It could just be that the Ukrainians continue plinking away, and as long as Putin keeps pouring resources in it, the Ukrainians don't necessarily have to push and win here. As long as their efforts are doing the job of distracting Putin. And I liken this, it's the guy jumping around on first base, distracting the pitcher from the guy on third, right? And as long as the pitcher's looking, the guy at first base doesn't have to do much, right? In fact, if the pitcher's looking at you, you can just stand on the bag, right? Hey, dude, I'm just here. As long as he's looking at you. And that's the point. As long as Putin is reinforcing this, he creates other opportunities. And where does he create the opportunities? In the north. Looking at the north. Okay, we got those arrows. Kupiansk to the north, Lyman to the south. This is what's happened. And what's likely to happen up here? Well, first of all, let's look at Kupiansk. If the Ukrainians continue pushing out of there, which it looks like they're going to do, the obvious target is Svatov. Svatov is at the intersection of no less than 5 ground lines of communication. It's a fairly smallish place, but it's the obvious target, right, from there. And you got a lot of water obstacles on your flank, and it looks good at this distance with a little low levels of detail. So I got question marks there. Again, lots of ifs, but that looks like a logical place no one's talking about, right? So this is my thing, is look for a move. I keep looking for the move out of Kupiansk, and I think it will end up going towards Svatov. That would be logical, because if you take that, then you cut off a lot of troops, you draw a lot of attention, and you can, basically cover the flank of what I think is going to be what they have to want to do. The Ukrainians have to want to get out of Lyman. And if we look at Lyman, where do they go from there? Well, from Lyman, you go to Kreminna. Basically, that's where the road goes. The road that's left. Behind Lyman, there's Torsk, and then the road to Kreminna. And Kreminna is the logical next step from Lyman, right? And so we expect to see, I would expect the Ukrainians to move on Kreminna. And then from Kreminna, they want to move down, get behind Lyshansk and Severodonetsk, right? This is going to be, and in fact, from Kreminna to Severodonetsk, that was how the Russians got there, right? And if you can get behind, if you can cut off at least some of the supplies to it, and you can start to envelop Severodonetsk and Lyshansk, those are major cities. And this would be a huge victory for the Ukrainians if they could do this. And as long as Putin is not rushing reinforcements to this area, they might have a chance. Then, if you recall, the attacks on Severodonetsk and Lyshansk were huge. And Russia just poured material, troops, and they just, expended a lot of resources. And, in history, we may look back and see that maybe this is where the Russian army was broken, because all their best equipment and efforts were put into taking those two cities for very little gain, except to be able to say, oh, we have all of Luhansk province. The thing is, if, given the price paid, if you could take it back, right, and now you take back the major cities, that is going to be a huge black eye for Putin. That is going to be a huge disaster and a huge victory for the Ukrainians. And I can't believe they wouldn't like to do it. Whether they can do it, whether it's the smart move or not, these guys are kind of showing us they know what they're doing. And a lot of people like to say, oh, they're getting a lot of advice from the West. And well, yeah, probably, and a lot of intelligence. Yeah, they probably are. But, we've given advice and intelligence to a lot of allies who failed to use it properly in the past. So, I'm saying, no, the Ukrainians have built this up. They have trained with NATO in the past, and they continue to draw on their resources. But using resources is smart, and they seem to know what they're doing. And so I'll be interested to see it. Sometimes the obvious thing is the last thing you want to do. But on another level, this is solid, right? If you could take Svatov, this is a logical next step. And as long as Putin is creating the opportunity, then they need to take advantage of it. If Putin stops, if threatening Lyshansk and Severodonetsk draws Russian troops away from another area, that creates another opportunity, right? And in the south, maybe. So this is what I think is going on and what we should be looking at. These are the next steps. And I think we're going to want to watch for, some of the names of these places coming up in the next couple weeks. Thank you for watching my short rant. I hope it was short and not too much of a rant. I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and though I teach at Troy University, this video is my own work. Troy University has neither approved nor reviewed the content. So there. And if you want to learn more about Troy anyway, figure out who would hire a guy like this, you can always go to www.troy.edu. I also am going to have a little card popping up here that you can go see my bio and some information about where I teach, which will descend to shameless self-promotion. But I want more students. What can I say? And finally, the music you've been listening to is Tonight at 8 by Shane Ivers. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back and enjoy another short rant.